A triple net lease is a common lease structure used primarily in commercial real estate, and despite its popularity, a lot of professionals misunderstand it. So what is a triple net lease, how does it work, and what does it include? Now, before we get started, it is absolutely imperative that you grab yourself a pen, some paper, and you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future videos. Let's start with the basics. The triple net lease is a lease agreement structure where the tenant pays all of the operating expenses for the property. So things like building insurance, property insurance, real estate taxes, and maintenance costs will all fall on the tenant on top of paying the rent. Overall, this is considered to be a turnkey investment because the landlord isn't responsible for property taxes, insurance, or operating expenses. That said, there are various commercial real estate leases out there, like the single net lease. With an option like that, the tenant must pay for the property taxes and rent only. Every commercial real estate lease falls along the spectrum, with an absolute net lease on one end and an absolute gross lease on the other. Most of them are somewhere in the middle, and these are usually referred to as hybrid leases. A triple net lease is often thought of to be absolute, but just because it's labeled as triple doesn't necessarily mean that it contains it all. Sometimes it's just called that for convenience. For example, when a building is new, the tenant might be responsible for handling replacements. On the other hand, on older buildings, it could be called a triple net, but the landlord is the one who has to deal with those expenditures. Sometimes people think about triple net as a double net lease, which requires the tenant to pay for property taxes, insurance, and the base rent. The most important thing here is just to read the lease. Make sure that tenants do that and fully understand the lease's terms. Simple labels aren't always enough here. Now, even if the lease is an absolute net lease, that doesn't mean it covers every single expense associated with the property. Though a true absolute net lease with a good tenant is considered a turnkey property from the investor's or landlord's perspective, there are still expenses that the tenant isn't responsible for. For example, it's pretty rare for the triple net lease to cover accounting costs charged by a landlord's CPA or cover legal fees. And while those are a small price in comparison to the purchase price, they aren't part of the monthly cost that the tenant must pay in the triple net lease. One of the more common misconceptions about a triple net lease is that it's risk-free. You know, the primary benefit of a triple net lease is that you have a predicted revenue stream for the long term with pass-throughs in place. So overall, there's less hassle and low management requirements. As nice as that sounds, that doesn't mean it's risk-free. You see, because most of these are for single properties, the tenant credit risk must be understood. You may not doubt a lease guaranteed by a parent company because it's financially strong and publicly traded. However, sometimes life happens, and your tenant could fall out of favor and go bankrupt. Remember, a single tenant property is either fully vacant or not. There's no in between, and this is something you need to keep in mind. One crucial component to focus on when analyzing your investment property is to understand the credit risk of the tenant. Triple net leases are only as strong as the tenant, so it's best to analyze the financial statements on the other side of the lease. Many single tenant deals involve large publicly traded companies, so it's easy to pull up their credit rating. However, private companies take a little bit more effort to complete a credit analysis. Despite that, you must still get and analyze their financial statements and trends to understand if this is the right tenant for you. This type of lease offers benefits to both landlords and tenants. You see, a tenant has the freedom within the structure to customize the space, and the landlord gets a reliable source of income with fewer overhead costs. With that, the landlord can play a less active role in managing the property. You have less to worry about, and the tenant doesn't have to feel like they're living under a microscope. Well, with a triple net lease, almost all of the responsibilities will fall onto a tenant. Therefore, the base rental can become a negotiating term. The tenant takes on more risk, so they can get a more favorable base rental price. The landlord could be responsible for things like the parking lot, roof, and structure maintenance, but it really just depends on the terms of the agreement. Generally speaking, a triple net lease is a popular structure for commercial real estate. If you own a commercial property, it is crucial that you understand the different types of net leases out there to determine which one is right for you. I know real estate is a massive industry that can get pretty confusing, and you probably have a lot of questions, but don't worry, because in this video right here, we tackled 5 of the most commonly asked questions that property managers get.